Hi, this is Jim Yukovich, and I'm coming to you from our model courtroom in our Los Angeles office. Today is January 24th, 2023, and I'm here to tell you the status of jury trials in California. Let's reflect on the past year, and as always, let's update you on what's happening with civil jury trials in California right now. So, where were we a year ago? After a long period of court closures due to the pandemic, courts were finally starting to resume jury trials when the Omicron variant surge happened. As I predicted, trials were delayed again, but by spring and summer, the courts were open again, and trials were going forward. Now, as we come into 2023, there once again is a spike in new cases caused by the new COVID variants. At the end of last year, there was once again talk about whether this new COVID spike would lead to a return to masking and social distancing. I don't think so. I don't think any court is going to do that now. While there may be still resurgences from time to time, what I can tell you is, in 2022, we started to move into the post-COVID era in the practice of law. And that area can be summed up in one word: backlog. Everyone will tell you, and it should come as no surprise, that the COVID pandemic and the court closures resulted in a major backlog of getting cases to trial. I've never seen so many cases set for trial, many of them on cases that were filed long before anybody ever even heard of COVID. Cases that seemed to be flatlining during the pandemic appear to have been shocked back to life. And courts are now trying to come up with a strategy of getting these trials completed or settled. I'm getting calls frequently on cases with clients new and old telling me a long dormant case that now is going to go to trial in a matter of months. If you're one of the thousands of clients and litigants that has an upcoming trial that is part of this COVID backlog, I guess you're interested in what the reality is of your situation. So our team took a look at what the major California counties are doing to deal with this backlog. And I'm going to tell you what we learned. After that, I'll give you some of my thoughts on what everyone with a case going to trial needs to be aware of and doing right now, because I think it's going to be a long while before this trial backlog is fully resolved. It's important to remember that the COVID pandemic has made permanent changes to how civil cases are litigated and tried here in California. As a result of the pandemic, the Code of Civil Procedure was permanently amended to allow for electronic service, which appears to now be the norm in every case. Also, the code was permanently amended to allow for remote depositions. The vast majority of mediations are now conducted by Zoom, if not all. And now it is much more easy to schedule multiple depositions, conferences, and mediations every week when long-distance travel is no longer required. As I talked about a while back in our video entitled Trial by COVID, which is actually still available on our website, I'm still not sure whether virtual trials are in anyone's best interest. And as far as I can tell from talking to judges and trial lawyers, the courts and legal community aren't sure either. I think that really the consensus is that they're not. NPR put out an excellent article on March 18th of the last year discussing the pros and cons of online jury trials. And this is what they said. They said in Alameda County, California, which is one of the first trial courts to experiment with virtual trials and is still doing so all or nearly all of its trials remotely today. The article notes that for one mesothelioma case in particular, prospective jurors had to sit through 2.5 weeks of remote jury selection, after which those selected then had to sit through 4 months of actual trial. The impression I get from articles like this and talking to my colleagues is that many judges felt virtual trials were the only way to get cases tried during the pandemic and get citizens rightfully concerned about their health to participate in jury service. But, at least to me, there's no broad consensus yet that virtual jury trials should ever be the solution to a backlog. If you try to research the causes and solutions for the COVID trial backlog, there are any number of articles proposing one remedy or another. One is recommending that parties stipulate to trial with fewer than 12 jurors. Another stipulating to an expedited jury trial option under California Civil Code. Stipulating to judicial reference under Code of Civil Procedure, Section 638, which is basically agreeing to binding arbitration by a retired judge. In reality, many parties are experimenting with some of these options. On both the plaintiff and defense side, parties appear to want the same type of jury trial with 12 jurors that they had before the start of the pandemic, which makes sense. We took a deep dive into the status of trial backlogs in all the major California county and federal courts. Our understanding is all the courts are dealing with a backlog and are working toward getting cases tried. Some courts have made public statements about how the backlog is impacting them. Let's talk about those courts now. Los Angeles County, where we are right now. In Los Angeles County, in-person civil trials are happening, but we do not have any information on the number of backlog cases. From what we can see, the LA County Court is still focused on completing those civil trials entitled to an early trial preference, such as when you have an elderly or seriously ill plaintiff, or those cases that have been pending for more than 5 years. California state law requires all cases to be brought to trial within 5 years, but even in those cases, the parties can stipulate to extending the time. And in some cases, judges are actively encouraging the parties to do that. The message the court is sending is there are still far more trials than there are available judges in courtrooms, and the court is still inclined to continue cases in a lot of instances to free up resources to handle preference or 5-year cases. While we are talking about Los Angeles County, I have to note what is probably the biggest development in that court, which is the phasing out of the personal injury hub. Years ago, due to budgeting problems, LA County created a separate court to handle only personal injury cases. Every PI case filed in LA was assigned temporarily to one of only 6 judges at the Spring Street Courthouse for all pretrial matters. Trial dates were set at the time of filing, and there would be no regular case management conferences. Then, on the day of trial, the case was assigned to one of a number of trial judges around the county to conduct the trial. All of you know about this. You would not know what judge would preside over your trial until the day of the trial. As of September 2022, the PI Hub had 45,000 cases. Starting in September of 2022, LA County Court began to phase out the PI Hub, and new independent calendar courts are being set up at different courthouses around the county. Cases will eventually be assigned to these courts for the entire case. Cases currently in the hub will be transferred to the independent calendar courts later this year, which is a really good idea, but it will cause confusion and I think some delay. I expect this will be beneficial to both plaintiffs and defendants because the PI Hub meant that each judge was responsible for ruling on dispositive and discovery motions for thousands of PI cases, which is not ideal, to say the least. An assignment to an independent calendar court should allow clients to know and assess the trial judge earlier in the process, which I think is helpful to everybody. Let's talk about Orange County, our neighbor to the south. In 2022, the Orange County Superior Court estimated at least 700 civil cases in the backlog stage that had not had trials set. The Orange County Court is addressing the backlog by setting mandatory settlement conferences, often with temporary judges, trying to get cases to settle. The court has said it will conduct both in-person and remote trials, but we know of no remote trials at this time, and I really don't expect them. We understand that one of the factors contributing to the trial backlog is the county only has about 10 judges who can conduct regular case management status conferences. They need more. Our firm regularly handles Orange County cases and recently opened an office in Orange County and Costa Mesa this year to more efficiently handle the increased caseload there. Let's talk about Riverside County. In Riverside County, like courts everywhere, the Superior Court is trying to dig its way out of the backlog. However, Riverside is reporting an additional problem, a critical shortage of judges. As of October of last year, the Riverside Superior Court currently needs at least 22 additional judicial officers to handle its caseload. To put that in perspective, currently they have 3.7 judicial officers per 100,000 residents, while statewide the average is 11.4 judicial officers per 100,000 residents. Riverside is also reporting its support staff has yet to return to pre-pandemic levels. People don't want to come back to work. We've also seen news articles and discussions about how misdemeanor criminal cases have been dismissed in Riverside County because judges are not available to try them in a timely fashion. From our research, it appears that fewer than 100 civil trials have been held in Riverside County since the pandemic. Compare that to Orange County, which has held over 300 civil trials during roughly the same period of time. The Riverside County Court has stated for the time being, it's determined to manage trials as efficiently as it can. We will continue to monitor the situation in Riverside County and bring you up to date when anything changes. Now, let's talk about San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County appears to be experiencing the same problems as Riverside. At this time, San Bernardino has a shortage of about 30 judicial officers, the highest number of vacancies in the state. This will likely cause further increases in the post-COVID backlog of jury trials. San Bernardino was the first court in Southern California to hold a remote trial back in 2021. It was a case against Monsanto involving the product Roundup, and plaintiff alleged she contracted lymphoma from using it. The trial came to a halt after 2 weeks when 2 court staffers and 1 juror tested positive for COVID. So one of the plaintiff's attorneys, Paul Kiesel of Beverly Hills, actually went into his own pocket to equip each juror with a Chromebook laptop computer to view testimony and exhibits from the comfort of their own homes. The trial continued via Zoom, but experienced so many glitches because jurors' individual Wi-Fi connections weren't all the same. Kiesel told the Sun newspaper that at least on a dozen occasions they had to stop the trial and the court reporter would have to read back testimony because a juror had missed something because of bad connection. Despite plaintiff's counsel's equipping jurors with all that technology, the trial still ended up with a verdict for the defense. One of the plaintiff's other lawyers told Reuters after the verdict, despite everyone's best efforts, it was impossible to try a coherent case via Zoom. Well, apparently the defense was able to do it. This brings up something I've noticed in the nearly 3 years that have passed since the pandemic. While some plaintiffs' lawyers push hard to convince courts to try Zoom trials early on, it seems many of the plaintiffs in the plaintiffs' bar do not want to try cases by Zoom, and I understand why. Because I think it decreases the effectiveness of plaintiffs' cases and of the defense cases also, for all of the reasons that we've already talked about. All right, what about San Francisco and the Bay Area? Well, I just spent a day in San Francisco in our new office, which we use for San Francisco-based cases. The San Francisco Superior Court is actually doing all in-person civil jury trials at this time. Across the Bay in Alameda County, it's a different story. All trials are by Zoom because of something going on there with the public health law that I don't fully understand. There is no scheduled date for when in-person trials will resume in Alameda. Also in the Bay Area, San Mateo County is back holding in-person trials and is operating normally. Let's talk a little bit about San Diego County. I visited our office in San Diego County a couple of weeks ago and had one of our attorneys there yesterday. The jury room was full of people waiting for assignment to in-person trials. Our attorney reported it looked very normal and pre-COVID. No one was wearing masks or asked to socially distance. So it appears that in-person trials are in full swing in San Diego. If you have a San Diego case and need assistance, of course we're happy to do it. Let's talk about California federal courts. The California federal courts have been holding in-person civil jury trials for more than a year now. None of the federal courts are at least publicly discussing any particular strategies for handling the jury trial backlog caused by COVID. However, one federal court where we are noticing some unusual delays is the Eastern District of California, which covers areas like Sacramento and Fresno and most of the eastern part of the state. The Chief Judge of the Eastern District has publicly stated that the court has experienced a judicial emergency due to the judicial vacancies and caseload that exceeds the current judge's ability to handle. This situation can only have been exacerbated by the pandemic. As a result, we're seeing delays in the Eastern District we do not see in other federal courts. For example, we have one Eastern District case in which we're still waiting for the court to rule on a dispositive motion that was filed on June 29th of last year. The Chief Judge of the Eastern District has stated this problem will not be resolved until Congress, waiting for them, creates 5 new judgeships in the district, which apparently has been recommended by the Judicial Conference of the United States. I won't be holding my breath. It remains to be seen if Congress will take action to alleviate the situation, which they should. Also, in addition to everything else, we have a court reporter shortage. Our research for this video, during this we've learned from being in court, that another factor contributing to civil trial backlog is a shortage of court reporters. Apparently, more than 58% of courts in the state report they've had to cancel or reschedule matters because of a lack of available court reporters. In California today, there are only 9 certified shorthand reporter programs available, and in 2021, only 175 applicants took the licensing exam, and only 36 passed. I can also tell you from personal experience, talking to my friends who are court reporters, that many of them are busy from sunup to sundown with remote depositions, hearing, and trials. They're doing their absolute best to keep the system moving. In our profession, sometimes we take it all for granted that there will always be a court reporter available, but this shortage emphasizes how critical these professionals are. We're short on court personnel, judges, court reporters. We can only hope this situation will improve in the near future. So, thank you very much for being with us. Any questions that you have, you can email me, and I thank you for joining us. We'll continue to keep you informed, and best to everyone for a wonderful 2023.